Hi guys, just before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to ask you a big favor. Assuming you like the content that I'm putting out on this channel, could you please do me a favor and press the subscribe button? It really does help reach more people. And while you're at it, if you could just smash that like button down there, we'd really appreciate it. I just want to get this channel out to as many people as possible, so more and more people are getting exposed to these kinds of stories. And I'll stop talking now and let you get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. In today's episode, we have Robyn Pineault. So Robyn is an author, health and lifestyle blogger, host of the Alpha Female podcast, and founder of Autoimmune Thriving. She started her blog in 2009 when she became a fitness competitor and model. At the time, she thought she was super healthy. She had subscribed to the notion of work-life balance and managed to fit everything in. But in reality, she was running herself into the ground. And actually, a few years later, in 2014, she was actually diagnosed with MS. After her diagnosis, Robyn, she realized she could actually take care of herself differently. She could eat in a way that served her really well, decrease inflammation in her body, supplement for macro and micronutrients that she was lacking, get the quality and quantity of sleep, and really learn how to de-stress from her busy schedule. She embarked on a fitness, health, and life journey that led her to the person she is today, which is why she is on the Chronic Comeback. I'm super excited to have you on. Thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
I am good. I'm really excited to chat with you. I haven't done an autoimmune-based podcast in a while, so it'll be fun to chat.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I kind of already, gave a brief overview of your story, but that is really just, a small snippet of it. So if you could just take us back to, and I think it's interesting that I feel like a lot of people that come on this podcast, quite a lot of people were big into fitness, big into activity, and clearly those kind of achiever types that push themselves a lot. And it seems to happen that people then, chronic illness comes. But could you talk us through what life was like before from a health perspective and what life was like in general?
Yeah, so you mentioned that I started my blog in 2009, and around the same time I was getting into fitness competitions. So let's go way back. I was a dancer for the majority of my life. So I was doing pre-professional ballet up until like the age of 13. So that was my sport. And then went to university, was kind of dancing here and there, but I wasn't really like focused. I wasn't working out. I had no idea what that was. And I became skinny fat was the term that I used.
That's me right now.
And so in 2009, I met an amazing group of women that were training together for a fitness competition. They were doing boot camp classes. So I joined them and I was like, this is cool. Let me try this out. And I got really into the fitness competition world. I think I competed from 2009 to around 2013. So I was a bikini competitor and sparkly bikini and the stripper heels on stage. And I got really frustrated with that because it was such a subjective sport, but I was becoming so strong and I was really proud of myself in terms of the athlete I was becoming. And then I discovered obstacle course racing. So I always joke around that I hung up my stripper heels for mud and monkey bars. And I started competing I did the gateway drug into obstacle course racing, which is Warrior Dash. And then you try like a Tough Mudder, and then you get into Spartan races. And then Canada has a whole bunch of different ones. So I was training at an obstacle course racing facility in Toronto, and I was really, really obsessed with it. I would do like weightlifting in the morning, and then I would go for a run after work. And I absolutely loved it. I had an amazing community. And in 2014, I had gone off to Nicaragua the month before I was diagnosed. And I had broken my nose surfing. So I'd come back from surfing with a broken nose. And then a few weeks later, I started getting MS symptoms. And so I thought it was simply from like getting the surfboard smashed into my face. I was dealing with some neurological issues. So it started in my right hand. everything started going numb, tingling, and it just slowly progressed all the way up my arm, down my shoulder, down the right side of my torso, and then down my right leg and into my foot. And that was the weird, when it started going down my torso, I was like, I can't feel anything. Like, what's going on? Like, this is weird. So I had already started to take care of myself differently because I was involved in obstacle course racing. So I had like a chiropractor, physiotherapist, like I had a team of people taking care of me. And I went to my chiropractor and he said, it was a new chiropractor. So we did a full family history, and my father lives with MS. And so he kind of looked at me and he was like, I don't want to, like, he didn't want to, I could tell now looking back, he didn't want to say, I think you have MS, but he was trying to lead me in the direction to figure that out. So he's like, I can't treat you. It might be a pinched nerve, but it might be neurological. So I would really urge you to go to your family doctor and ask for testing. And I said, what sort of testing should I ask for? And he said, well, let's start with x-rays and then go from there. And I was like, but if it's neurological, like, are x-rays even going to work? And he said, well, just start somewhere. I wish he had given me a bit more information, because 3 days later, when my entire leg and foot went numb, I decided to drive myself to the hospital. So I always say in my story that I am very grateful for the speed that I was diagnosed. Many people with MS, and this is the same in the autoimmune community, is it takes years and years to figure it out. And you shared a little bit about your story before we started chatting. So I am very grateful that I had 1 week of symptoms. I drove myself to the hospital, gave them my family history, and they did a CAT scan and couldn't find anything. You can't discover MS on a CAT scan. So they said, here's some Advil, go home, come back in a few days if your body's still numb. It's like, no. So thankfully I have a very strong personality, and I have a very, very, like, I'm very blunt and I'm very short with people, especially when like something's wrong and it needs to be figured out. And I was like, no, I'm staying here. What's our next test? And they said, well, I guess we could give you an MRI, but there's no more emergency spots for people that come to the emergency room until later today. Cool. Actually, I asked if I could leave and then come back. And they're like, if you leave and come back, you lose your spot in the queue. I was like, okay. So you're telling me we don't have an appointment till later this evening and I can't go back home to rest. But yeah, okay, I'll just hang out in the waiting room. And I had the worst migraine that day too. I get my MRI, and I remember very clearly the internist. And when they introduced themselves to me, I was like, what the hell is an internist? And they're like, we take care of internal medicine. Still don't know what that is, but cool. And I remember his words to me. And they had done an MRI without contrast dye. If people in the MS world will know that you need the contrast dye to see the lesions in the brain or the spine in the central nervous system. And so they did the first MRI, and they said, we found some lesions on your spine and in your brain that are indicative of MS. We need you to stay for another MRI with contrast dye. And I looked at him, I was like, so you're basically telling me that you think I have MS, but it's not confirmed. So now you're going to tell me that this is a possibility, and you're going to ask me to wait until whatever time is the next MRI. So now I'm going to sit here worrying that I have MS before it's actually confirmed. So I was very angry, very, very angry. And then they wouldn't admit me to the hospital. So they left me on a gurney in the middle of the ER in front of the nurses' station. Because I didn't have any heart or respiratory issues, they could give me like even a room with a curtain. So I was in the middle of the hallway overnight. So the MRI was like at 8 or 9 p.m. at night. And the next MRI wasn't going to be until 9 a.m. in the morning. Still, they wouldn't admit me, and they wouldn't let me go home. So I cried all night on a gurney. I had one of my best friends came and brought me like contact solution in a contact case so I could take out my contacts. I think she brought me like vitamin water too, which looking back on it now, it's like, well, that's healthy. She probably gave me like vitamin water. We sat there, and I was literally also outside of a room where they detox drug addicts. So they kept like bringing drug addicts in and out of this room. It was the craziest experience. And then long story short, next MRI in the morning with contrast dye, they discovered, I think it was over 20 lesions in my brain. And then the lesion in I think it was C4, C5, I don't even remember at this point, was the one that was causing all the symptoms. So that was how I was diagnosed. And then I know I'm rambling, but back to the whole like fitness world, I had 15 races that I had enrolled in for the following year. I ran all 15 and another 5. So this was me saying like, I'm stronger than MS. It's not going to slow me down. Like that was my mentality. I have since learned that that is not a healthy way to treat your body. But that was my first year and I had something to prove. And the hardest thing was people were like, oh, you're so inspirational. Like, that's so amazing. I'm like, I gave myself adrenal fatigue, guys. Like, you don't get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that is wreaking havoc on your body and then create more inflammation from physical stress. So I've learned my lesson, but that's a little bit of a backstory.
So can I just ask, because obviously you said that your initial symptoms was like pretty much half your leg went numb. Did you say?
It was the entire right side of my body except for my face. So it was from the lesion down.
And so from that point, for the rest of that year when you were competing in these races, was that still ongoing all of the time, or like what were your symptoms like?
So I only get symptoms when I overheat now. So, which happens when you do physical exercise. Yeah. So I was doing different things to keep myself cool, but many times I would lose definitely grip strength. So I would be on like the monkey bars and I would lose the grip strength in my right hand. So that was super frustrating. But it was like everyone that I trained with and raced with, they all knew this. They knew that the minute I finished the race, they had to get a hose on me to try to cool me down. And looking back, it wasn't the smartest, but I would literally like run and people would put ice packs on me, or I would run directly to the first aid tent and ask for ice in a bag, and I would just put it on where the lesion is. It has since disappeared on scan, so it's no longer inflamed. Doesn't mean that it's gone. It just means it's no longer inflamed. But yeah, it was not smart of me because, yeah, same thing. We were talking before we started recording that we've both been to Bali, and I went and I did my yoga teacher training there, and the 40-degree weather and I do not get along. So there was 2 fans in the yoga shala, and I literally positioned both of them, or I would position myself at least in front of one of them. I did not make a lot of friends that trip. Everyone was like, why does she always have to be in front of the fan? And I was like, well, I could lose sensation in the right side of my body, so that's why I have to be in front of the fan.
You win.
I would put peppermint oil on the back of my neck. That really helps with cooling. So I keep doing things that I know are going to put me in difficult situations, but I know that if I can keep my body cool, the symptoms go away.
So in terms of, you get to the end of that year and you've completed all of those races, which is crazy, which actually it resonates with me a lot. When I first started, it started being like really bad for me like 6 years ago. My body really didn't feel like I should be doing any sort of like major physical activity, but I was like, fuck this, I'm gonna push through it. Like I was still playing like 11-a-side, like soccer here, like, and I would run extra hard just to prove that I could to myself. But in reality, I was like, I've now got all these chronic injuries that just won't go away. And I should have, that was probably the attitude that got me in that position in the first place. At what point did you realize, okay, I need to start taking this a little bit seriously? And then what did you start doing?
I don't think I have taken it seriously yet.
Okay.
I think I'm still in a learning journey here, just because I have, moving my body, being physically active makes me feel vital and like full of vitality. It looks different now. I am also now a mother. I gave birth to twins a year ago.
Awesome.
And that was a whole other journey, and like learning, like I got really large. I was a beached whale.
You had 2 people inside of you.
I had 2 people inside of me. So I could not maintain physical activity. Like this was the first time I really, like, MS never really slowed me down. I gave myself adrenal fatigue that I had to like rest. And, you know, I did yoga instead of running. But I still was always physically active. Becoming a beached whale with twins meant like I couldn't even walk. It was painful to walk. And now I'm slowly regaining my fitness and my strength now. So that's a whole other ball game where I'm just like, it was really hard to even like ride my bike for 30 minutes. I was like, this is really frustrating. So it's a journey that I'm still in, where instead of giving myself permission to do something quote unquote slower or different, I get really mad at my body that I'm not physically able to do what I want to do. And that's a journey of giving yourself more grace. It's a journey of reframing mindset in terms of like the level of fitness that you need to, that you think you need to be at. Like, why do I think I need to ride my bike for an hour when I can ride my bike for 30 minutes? It's things like that, but that's still a journey for me. And I don't think I have completely figured that out.
Do you think there's a fine balance between when people say, oh, take it easy, and, you know, you've got to manage yourself and that kind of thing, and then there is an element then of like you're playing, your mind's then playing into that condition maybe more so, and maybe you're not able to do, like you went the opposite, right? You were just like, no, I'm going to go the opposite, but you could have actually gone, okay, I've got MS, I've got these weird symptoms, I need to really look after myself. And then go down the kind of fear route, I guess, which most people would, and not be physical, not move. Did you get any of that kind of advice at all?
Yeah, I remember sitting with practitioners that were like, you know, going for a walk is okay. And I'm like, well, why should I walk when I could run? And it was almost like they were trying to give me permission to slow down. But I thought, and it came across to me as if I was now weak. And that was really hard for me because I'm like, I'm not weak. I'm very, very strong. So I've also been on a huge journey of like understanding rest. And I get really, really triggered now when I don't see people resting, that I know should be resting, because that's something that I've had to learn for myself. So, and then again, even with the pregnancy, so I feel like different things in my life have taught me different things. The autoimmune diagnosis really set me up for teaching myself how to take better care of myself. And then I was much more prepared to handle a twin pregnancy. But like for the first month of being pregnant, all I wanted to do was sleep. And the Robyn from before would have said that that was me being lazy instead of literally I'm growing humans. So there's a very interesting conversation that needs to be had around the perceptions of rest and lazy, and ensuring that we split it apart, and it's not associated.
And with the MS that you're dealing with, is it a case of, you know, you need to, if you'd have just continued on, you know, doing what you were doing, like living your whole life, you could have got worse? Like what kind of, or is it, like, is it, because I know there's a lot of, well, I understand there's a lot of different types of MS, right? There's some that are maybe more extreme, and then others that, so could you just give a bit of detail about that?
Yeah. So, I haven't talked about this in a while. There's 4 different kinds. So there's the progressive kind, and then there's the relapsing kind, where you get better and then you have an attack, you get better, then you have an attack. The progressive kind, you just slowly get worse. The way that I understand the disease and how it affects us is, the way that I understand it is, if we don't take care of ourselves differently and change aspects of our lifestyle, we will all progressively get worse. And that if we change the way that we're taking care of ourselves, and I always say differently than better. I used to say we need to take better care of ourselves, but then that's completely like dismissing what we were doing before. And then it's almost like slapping yourself on the wrist and saying like, oh, you should have been doing that. And then it's not treating yourself very well. So it's just simply saying like, this is how I'm going to treat myself now. These are the changes that I'm going to make in my lifestyle. I truly believe, and I'm still struggling, like I'm actually experiencing symptoms right now that I don't normally have. And it's because my stress level is up. So I have 6 pillars of health that I always focus on. You kind of alluded to them in the bio: nutrition, supplementation, movement, sleep, stress management, and reducing your toxic load. And if I were to go back to the Robyn from before, I know that I would probably be relapsing or even progressive. So I know the things that I've changed in my life are keeping myself as healthy as I can be. And there's always things that I can be doing and improving. Like, this is a lifelong journey. It's not like you just get, like, you snap your fingers and you're in remission. It's, you're going to be living with this. And there's so many autoimmune diseases where you're going to be living with it for the rest of your life. It may not be something you think about all the time. Like, as I said, like, I haven't done a podcast like this in a while. I don't talk about my MS a lot anymore. I used to talk about it all the time. And I came to a point where I was like, I think I'm talking about it too much. I think I'm giving it too much attention in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I know what you mean. But I think it's interesting that you talked about using your diet and lifestyle to keep I guess keep yourself from progressing, like the illness or anything progressing worse. But then I guess most people in life are doing that to an extent, the people are being healthy, because ultimately someone will at some point in their lives, if they're not treating themselves well, most people in that, you get those really lucky people that drink whiskey and smoke every day and they die when they're 99. I don't get those people, but most people, it catches up with them. And I guess for you, with something like this, it actually has maybe got you to look at it earlier on in your life, but actually means that you could have a healthier lifestyle like later on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like, the way that I think about it is that I am creating a better quality of life for myself, so that I can have potentially the longevity that I wish and want to have. My grandmother just passed away at the age of 102, and my grandfather passed away at 97.
Wow.
So trying to explain to her why I don't eat gluten and sugar and dairy was very difficult. Like, I just stopped because it just doesn't make sense to her.
Yeah.
But my dad was diagnosed with MS later in life. I think he was in like his 40s when he was diagnosed, and I was diagnosed in my early 30s. Yeah, really. I was like, how old am I now? Early 30s. So, we're being diagnosed with autoimmune diseases so much earlier in our life. But I think it's a little bit easier to teach new ways of living than when, like, my dad, I've tried to show him how I'm taking care of myself, and he does it here and there. And then I'll catch him like eating cheese. I'm like, Dad, dairy, inflammation. He's like, I know, but it's so good. So it's like, it's a different mindset, right? Like, when you've reached a certain point in your life, you're like, why do I have to give these things up? Whereas I think when you're diagnosed a little earlier, you're like, no, these are the lifestyle changes I'm going to make. I've found really great alternatives to cheese. Like, I'm good. And then just moving on.
No, I know what you mean. So my mum was talking about, she's got this awful back pain. Like she plays, she's like 76 and plays a lot of golf and is very active and will push through it. And then this back pain is just getting worse and worse. And I had someone on the show that talked about John Sarno's book. It's a lot of it's around like emotional stuff causing that pain in the body. And you should have seen the look on her face when I'm talking to her about it. She was like, and I was like, I'm going to buy it for you and you should read it, but nothing will happen. Like, there's no way. Like, when people from that generation, it's just, unfortunately. But in terms of like your mindset, I guess let's go back to like that year afterwards. It sounds like you just pushed through it, but did you have times where you were like, obviously it sounds like you were really upset in the hospital when they had you on the gurney for 24 hours, whatever it was, which sounded awful. But like mentally, like, what were you going through in those like first few months, having had this kind of like bombshell dropped on you?
Yeah, it was interesting because I went into immediate research mode, and because I had been sharing so much of my life on social media, I immediately shared that I was diagnosed with MS. Looking back, I don't know if that was the best decision, but it's a whole other conversation around like workplace privacy and stuff like that. But I immediately shared what I was going through, and the inpouring of communication was exactly what I needed, because I then discovered different books that I needed to read, different people that I needed to touch upon. And now, because I've been so open about my journey and how I take care of myself, even now, I get so many messages from people newly diagnosed with MS so that I can potentially help guide them. And yeah, the mindset was, I need to research this as much as possible. This is not going to be like, the diagnosis is not going to define me. And so I wrote a blog post pretty much early on that there's 4 different types of people that come out of the woodwork when you announce a diagnosis. There's the people that say, I'm so sorry. And for me, I hated that. I hated it. I thought it was pity. I thought people were just pitying me, and I didn't want people's pity. I've just come to learn that it's just a standard statement that we say in society because we don't know what to say. And there's the people that are like, oh my God, that's so horrible, because they're picturing what it would be like if that was their diagnosis. So it has nothing to do with you. It has simply everything to do with their potential fear around chronic disease and illness. There's the people that are practical helpers. These are the best kinds. They're like, can I go grocery shopping for you? What do you need? Can I come? Like, I had friends bringing me smoothies in the hospital, fresh salads. Like, those are the people that you want.
Oh yeah, I like those.
In a diagnosis. I think, oh, one person brought me lip balm in the hospital. Amazing. That air is dry. There are the research helpers. So they're like, like there's an amazing Dr. Wall. She's got this Wall's protocol. Perfect. One of the first books I read, and like one of the foremost experts in MS. If I hadn't posted that I was diagnosed, I wouldn't have got that recommendation. When I probably would have found her book later, but found that. Then there's the opinion givers. So it's not the research givers, like here's a book or here's an article or here's something that might help you. It's like, here's the snakeskin oil you should be taking. And it's just like, the only thing is that there's some valid things in there. So it's like filing all of those when you're in the right mindset to sort through them and do your own research. But you can get inundated with all of that. So I went into research mode, and then I went into this, like, this is not going to slow me down. I'm going to live with this. I'm going to overcome this. Like, it was, I'm really achievement focused. So it was like something I needed to achieve. And that's just how I'm built. I do talk about a lot how I did not go through the stages of grief properly.
Right.
But also, like, who's to say what's the proper way to go through them? Yeah. But I tried to go straight to acceptance. And the other phases of grief, they'll pop up in like the worst times. Like when you're running a race and you've lost all feeling on the right side of your body, you fully might break down crying in the middle of a mountain during an obstacle course, because you're like, I'm now dealing with the grief that I should have tried to deal with at the time of the diagnosis.
God. And so at what point, so you had these symptoms that were going on throughout that first year, and then you realized like when things like heated up, like that caused a lot of issues. But obviously you through your own research, you realized that diet, stress, all of that kind of things. At what point were you able to get it to a point where you like, and I know you're still working through it, but compared to that first year, you felt like you got it more under control and actually you could live a more normal life?
Yeah, I would say, because I went straight into an elimination protocol from a diet standpoint. And within 6 months, I noticed crazy changes. So, my MRI scans were showing that like my lesions were either disappearing or they were getting smaller. So the amount of inflammation that had been in my body, I was able to decrease quite quickly. There's chronic inflammation that I think you'll then be working through for a long time, because you can't live in a bubble. So the amount of toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis, like you're constantly going to have to be reducing your toxic load. But there are, really easy ways to reduce inflammation in your body, which is applicable to all autoimmune disease, in terms of removing inflammatory foods from your diet or inflammatory foods to you. So, for example, I can't eat a lot of nightshades. That's not applicable to everyone, but I learned about that when I did the autoimmune paleo protocol and elimination diet. When I started really understanding how I react to stress, and so that was a lot of mindset work in terms of how I perceive stress in the work environment, how I perceive stress from a physical standpoint, how I take care of myself to reduce inflammation that I create from physical stress, stuff like that. So when I really started focusing on that, getting 8 hours of sleep, I really truly think, because I was doing all of it at the same time, it all was able to take a noticeable difference within the first 6 months.
God, so it sounds like you were like all out attack in every different areas. It sounds like you talked through the 4 different kind of people that you had in your life, which some of them can be really helpful, some of them can be incredibly annoying. What was your support network like, and how did it affect the relationships you had in your life?
It was interesting because I had some really great best friends, who just asked me what I needed. So, the friend that drives to the hospital in the middle of the night to bring me contacts and contact solution, it's the person that just knows that the little things that they can do. The people that find book recommendations for you, or they're doing their own research and sending you articles to read, super, super helpful. My mom, I think my mom, called my mom that night, and she arrived the next morning. She arrived just as I was getting out of the second MRI. So my parents have been absolutely amazing. What was really, really hard at that time was I was newly out of a very toxic relationship, and I had just started dating again. So this is a very interesting thing, that I always recommend people read the book When the Body Says No. If you haven't read that yet, it's super fascinating. And it categorizes and quantifies patients. So Dr. Gabor Mate, I believe is the author's name. He basically has seen a ton of patients. And so he's got a chapter on cancer patients, and it's just his observations of all of his cancer patients. He's got a chapter on MS. And I had read that book, and he said over and over again, he noticed that his MS patients were A-types overachievers. It's clear, how I attacked my healing. But a lot of them had gotten out of a toxic relationship, or had toxic, or were still in toxic relationships. And I was in a very toxic relationship. I called off a wedding in 2012, 2 years basically before my diagnosis, but I had been in that relationship for 4 years. And I truly believe that a lot of that stress contributed to the perfect storm for why my body was susceptible to developing this disease. And so I had to do a lot of therapy was absolutely massive in my healing journey. And that was really important for me to continue as I was diagnosed, so that I could work through all of the trauma that I had experienced from that relationship. But I was starting to date again during this time. It was so weird. I remember I was dating someone during my diagnosis. And I remember texting him saying that I was in the hospital, and he said, are you okay? I'm like, I was just diagnosed with MS. He's like, okay, well, let me know when you get out. And I've been dating him for a month. So it was still new, but it was long enough that it was okay. And he broke up with me when I got out of the hospital. He said, I don't want to be with anybody who's going to potentially be in a wheelchair in the future.
Oh my God.
6 months later, he messaged me because like all I was posting was like pictures of me like racing and all of these competitions. He's like, I'm sorry, I don't think I should have broken up with you. I was like,
Yeah, what an idiot.
What? And I tried to start dating again, but I would go on dates and I'm like, should I tell them I have MS the first date, the second date, or the third date? Like, I don't know at what point I should tell them these things.
Yeah.
I ended up just in like a really great relationship with one of the guys that I was training with and racing with. And it was the best relationship that I could have been in that year because he was very, very caring. He didn't try to diminish any of the things that I was doing. Like if I needed to eat gluten-free, we ate gluten-free. If I needed to eat at a restaurant that was like, I needed to have dairy-free, we found some place that I could eat. Like he was very, very supportive in me learning how to take care of myself. It wasn't the right relationship for me. And I actually met my husband at the end of that year. And so I had been so public about MS on my social media, and my husband had actually been stalking me on social media. So when we met, he already knew that I was diagnosed. He already knew how I was taking care of myself, and he had so many questions. So that was really interesting to like find someone that really supported the way that I had figured out how to take care of myself, wanted to be a part of my life. And he's always been like my biggest advocate. So to have someone that advocates for you is really, really important, because I know that that's really hard in the autoimmune community. Like going to a restaurant with friends, and you're the person that like, here's my list of meal restrictions. And they're just like, oh, don't invite Robyn next time so we can go to the Italian restaurant. So like having friends that will check ahead of time, like the amount of people that send me a restaurant menu link and say, can you eat something here? I would really like to go here. Like that. I think that's the biggest help, is just knowing that you care about your friends that have, are dealing with something, and that you'll support them and not make them feel like they need to ostracize themselves from the group, just to take care of themselves differently.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's having people who understand that is really important. That's amazing that your husband is as you say, such an advocate. In terms of your diet now, are you because I've talked a lot about this, about kind of being almost like too extreme with your diet, that it can be a bit of a stress itself. Do you allow yourself to be, to have the odd, thing that isn't right for you, like a more of a 90-10, 80-20 rule?
Yeah. So I've definitely like gone through some phases. So to start out, very, very strict elimination protocol, did reintroductions. And then I just figured out what worked for me, and I didn't really stray from it. When I met my husband, we'd go out to restaurants, and I would, we'd go out to a taco restaurant. Apparently I say taco funny. He always makes fun of me.
No, I think, see, we were talking about, for those of you who are listening, I was, before we started the recording, I was telling Robyn about going to Bali, and so she started looking it up and thought I said Bali as in with an R, but for those of you in the UK, we pronounce it Bali. And then how do you pronounce it?
Bali.
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 Don't. So, and I know Canadians and Americans are very different, but English people can't tell the difference. I think Americans say taco.
Yeah. So I think I have like a British version of taco.
Yeah, taco. Yeah.
Taco.
Sorry.
And there's always tomatoes on them, and I always try to make sure that I'm eating a gluten-free tortilla shell. And I ask for no cheese, and then I always forget to say the no tomatoes. So I would eat that, and I'd be like, okay, I'll be fine. Like I need to have the right mindset about this, that I don't need to think about it as like the worst thing ever. And I'll eat it with like the best mentality around it. And then my stomach does not digest it properly. So like there's things about mindset that I try to have, but then I also know how my body functions. So it's things like that. We went on our honeymoon in Europe. We did a tour. We went to Poland, Germany, Switzerland, France. And I was like, I'm not going to have meal restrictions while we're there. I'm going to see if it's really true. Is the grain different in Europe than it is in North America? Is the dairy different in Europe than North America? And for the most part, I felt okay. But by the end of the 3 weeks, I was so sluggish. And I could feel like a bit of distendedness in my stomach. And I was like, no, my body just can't, like my gut is not completely healed yet. So I have tried to like be more lenient. And then I notice how it's not serving me well. And then I'll go back to, I don't like saying strict because I think that that has a really negative connotation, but I just go back to the way that I know I eat the foods that I know serve my body the best. And now I'm actually dealing with postpartum. I've had high liver enzymes for an entire year, and nobody can figure it out. And I'm doing a lot of research around my hormones and insulin resistance and just insulin sensitivity, and trying to figure that out. So I'm having to like relook at some of the foods that I'm eating that potentially were okay before, but now are affecting my body in a different way. So for example, carbs that I've brought back in, like brown rice and brown rice pasta. I'm just probably not processing it very well because I may have an insulin sensitivity problem that I've got to figure out next. So I think the food journey always evolves. I think it's just like focusing on nutrients, focusing on whole foods will serve everyone really, really well. And then it's discovering the different nuances and working with really great practitioners. So I work with a naturopath. I've worked with holistic nutritionists. It's just getting different perspectives. And then you're literally your own science experiment. So you have to try different things out. You have to track it. You have to either journal or like figure out how you can track it, everything from emotions to sleep to digestive things. So yeah, it's kind of fun. If you're a lifelong learner, if you love experimenting, then you're just like, cool, I'm the science experiment. What am I going to try this week?
Yeah. How are you dealing with being a new mum? Well, when you had your, because that is, I've got to say, so a lot of pretty much every one of my friends has had their first child this year. So it's, and then I think about it for myself, and it's probably not too far away for me. But the thought of me having a baby to deal with right now, with on top of all the stuff I have to do for my health, it's stressful just thinking about it, let alone it actually happening. And I almost think, wow, I'm spinning enough plates at the moment.
Yeah.
We'll add one baby, but then if another baby, the universe just threw twins at you. How did you, like, how are you dealing with that, and how is it navigating that?
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out every single day. I have really, really like strong days where I've got everything figured out. I do everything on my checklist for my health, for their health. And it feels really good. And then there are other days that I'm completely overwhelmed. And we put the kids to bed and I literally go lie down on our bed and I just start bawling. And my husband's like, oh gosh, what happened? And I'm just like, it's just too much. Like there's days where it's just, I get so overwhelmed. And I have an interesting energy type. This is totally off topic, but I've just interviewed 5 different guests on my podcast around human design. And so I find the topic fascinating. But my energy type is a generator. So if you think about it, the generators of the world usually have endless energy to do things. And we have endless energy around things that light us up. We don't have endless energy if something doesn't light us up. So when I'm faced with having to try to take care of myself, try to take care of the house, try to work full time, I just sometimes hit a wall because I may not have like meditated in the morning, or may not be, I may have eaten sugar in the afternoon instead of like a good snack that serves my body well. So it's usually because I haven't taken care of myself to like the best of my ability. And I give myself grace for that because I can't have the perfect autoimmune healthy checklist every single day. But I know what I need to do to take care of myself. So I just kind of recenter, refocus on what I need to focus on. And it was my husband that actually told me early on in our relationship, when I was getting overwhelmed with all of the things that I do, he's like, why don't you write them down? And then when you're overwhelmed, just go to your list and say, what's the next thing on the list that I can do for myself right now in this moment? And it's knowing that like, you don't have to check off every single thing in the list, but you have that reference. So when you get overwhelmed, you're not keeping a running total in your head. You can go and refer to the piece of paper.
Mm.
And then it's also asking for help. I don't ask for help a lot. So, you know, I'm working full time. I'm running my podcast. I'm doing my personal social media. I'm making sure that the babies have all the right foods available for them throughout the day. We have a full-time nanny. So I'm making sure that she knows the instructions for the day. So it's just a lot. And sometimes I'm just like, I'll turn to my husband and I'll be like, I need you to make sure the nanny knows what's for lunch. So, and it's just making sure that I speak up and ask for the help that I need. So it's, again, if you have an amazing support system, like, lean on them. I think I've just had a really hard time asking for help because I think I should be able to do it all.
Yeah.
The other thing when it comes to kids is, because it runs in the family and it is potentially genetic. Again, there's no proof, but my dad has MS. I have MS. I am doing everything in my power so that the babies will never have to experience this. And so I am going to be the mom that is going to be super strict about their diet. Sorry, not strict, super specific about their diet.
Yeah.
You know, they're eating the exact same way that I'm eating so that they potentially never have to deal with the gut health issues that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm the crazy mom that's like, do not give my kids gluten or dairy, those will be my most important ones for them. I'll keep nightshades in their diet because they don't have to heal their gut issues. But I will definitely be the mom that has very strict parameters, and like, for sure they're going to go away to university or whatnot and they'll be like, all the bread, and I'm like, no. But I'm hoping that as they grow up and we have, you know, really good conversations, that they understand why we eat in a certain way. And obviously if I'm taking care of everyone the way that I want to, they're not going to understand because they're never going to have the pain point.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing, is like, when people don't have a pain point, they don't know why you're doing something. But when someone has a pain point, like if you've grown up with diarrhea your entire life and you're not fixing your gut health, but like your body's telling you something. And so when you start and you're like, oh, this is what it's like when you feel good, then you're not going to go back to the other way. So I think that's the hard thing about raising kids, is that I'm going to try to protect them as much as possible. But they won't know the pain point to why they're doing something. So that'll be interesting to see as they grow up.
Yeah, I often think that, like, if I had like, when I have children, like them going to like some party or something and they just like stuffing themselves with like sugar and cake and stuff like that, and I'm just like, oh my god. But then I'm like, you know, it is enjoyable when you're a kid to go and do those things. So it's a tough one. I'm not going to stress about that now. What would be, just last question really, like for me, like what would be your advice to someone? Because for me, like what's coming, through this, is so obvious through this episode, is your mindset has been so strong throughout this whole time. I know you would have had down days, of course, like it's impossible to not do that, but you very much attack this head on. What would be your advice to someone right now? Many people listening to this going through loads of different chronic issues. What would be advice to someone who's going through like the toughest time at the moment, and in order for them to keep going?
I remember going to a place in Toronto when I was living in Toronto when I was diagnosed. I now live in Ottawa, and there was a healing, I don't even know how to classify them, a healing place. And they had reached out to me and offered me some treatments that included a lot of things that you don't see in North America. like PEMF treatments that are becoming much more popular in different places. They had these most amazing, like I called them crystal nap beds. It was this bed that vibrated at a certain frequency. And they had crystals above so that you were doing crystal therapy as well. And I was like, this is like so weird, but cool. I'm going to have like an hour-long nap that is really relaxing. And this was me like trying to fix my sleep habits. So that was interesting. But all that being said, is the owner of this place, it's called Soul 7 in Toronto. He looked at me the first time I came in and he said, "You're going to be fine. You have all of the capabilities that you need to heal yourself." And I looked at him and I said, like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, "You are going to be able to heal yourself." And that has stuck with me for years. It was the first person that spoke that belief into me that I would have the capabilities to take care of myself, that I would be able to heal myself. And this is why I talk about how we all become our best health advocates. Yes, we need to find different experts in different topics, but you are the one that put all of those pieces together. One practitioner is not going to put all of the pieces together and sit you down and say, "I need you to go see a naturopath, an acupuncturist, a physiotherapist, and a chiropractor now." You have to do that for yourself. So you get to empower yourself to take care of yourself differently. You get to heal yourself. And that concept of healing, I think, is different in everybody's mind. So healed may mean no symptom to one person. Healed may mean a better quality of life than I had before. Or healed may mean that I have no disability and I can take care of myself independently. So that's going to mean different things to different people. But what resonates with you is right now at this moment is what's meant to guide your journey forward. So just know that you have all of the capabilities to take care of yourself and heal yourself.
Love that. Yeah, super powerful. And that's definitely something that people need to hear. And I hope, and I'm sure people will have got a hell of a lot from your story, but just from that last bit is incredibly powerful. Thank you so much. Just in terms of if people wanted to reach out to you at all and connect with you, are they able to do that? And if so, how?
Mm-hmm. So I've two different places that I hang out online. I have my personal website. It's still under my maiden name, so robynbaldwin.com. There's a drop down in the blog header for specifically like living with MS. So all of the blog posts I've written around MS are there. On Instagram, I'm at Robyn Pineault, Pineault, and that's where I hang out personally. But then my Autoimmune Thriving world is where I share how I live with MS. So I have at Autoimmune Thriving on Instagram, and then same for the website. And the only thing that I'm offering there right now that I'm really lit up about right now, I used to offer like in-person yoga retreats and a program, but what I'm doing is lifestyle audits. And it's super fun. So if someone's really overwhelmed around what to do next, or the order that they could take care of themselves in, what I'll do is I'll sit down with them for an hour and I'll ask a ton of questions. I have a questionnaire that I send out, and they answer questions around nutrition, supplementation, all of that. And then I put together a little guide for them. So I like to see myself as a tour guide for autoimmune healing. And I just kind of put it in order and like, try this first, then tackle this, then tackle this. So it's kind of giving somebody a roadmap so that they don't have to figure it out for themselves if they're super overwhelmed.
No, that's actually really helpful. I could have probably done with that 6 years ago instead of just scattergun trying everything. Cool. Thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. I know you said it's been a while, but I think it's a story that definitely needs to be told regularly. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.